Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Thursday, January 3rd. A little Chopin, my man. That's his Revolutionary Etude, Opus 10, number 12. I think he wrote it when he was about 21. Revolution. And it's Van Cliburn. For you younger folk, at age 23 in 1958, he won the quadrennial International Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow. A huge piano competition every 4 years, and this is at the height of the Cold War, and for quite a number of years Van Cliburn was one of the best ambassadors America had from a cultural standpoint. Then he kind of disappeared. So that's your culture moment. The Dow Jones, this is about 4:03 Eastern Time. The Dow Jones finished down 22 to 13,390, about 0.2%. S&P down 0.2%, and NASDAQ down 0.4% to 3,100. Europe was fairly flat. Gold closed at 1663, oil 92.65. And the 10-year Treasury rose the yield to 1.91%. Before you panic, the record low was July 24th at 1.39%, so we've had a little move since then. But December 31st of 2011, so 1 year ago, the 10-year was at 1.88. Now the reason why it moved up was because late today the Federal Reserve released the minutes from its Open Market Committee of December 11th and 12th. And the policymakers said they will probably end their $85 billion monthly bond purchases sometime in 2013, this year. So that spooked a few market participants. Specifically, a quote was, "A few members expressed the view that ongoing asset purchases would likely be warranted until about the end of 2013. Several others thought that it would probably be appropriate to slow or stop purchases well before the end of 2013, citing concerns about financial stability or the size of the balance sheet." Now recall, the Fed's balance sheet is up to $3 trillion, on its way to $4 trillion if you spend, or if you purchase $85 billion in treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. 12 times 85 is about $1 trillion a year, so a $4 trillion balance sheet by the end of this year. Rather concerning. Just remember that the bond buying program is designed to keep the long end of the curve low to support housing, quantitative easing, keeping short rates at zero, and screwing savers for 4 years now. That program continues, according to the Fed's December meeting, until the unemployment rate hits 6.5%. And tomorrow we have a key employment report. Also in the economy today, Spending Pulse MasterCard, you recall, had forecast holiday sales, Christmas sales of about 0.7%. The National Retail Federation was forecasting 4.1%. I'm on the side of the National Retail Federation. But today, 20 retailers reported December sales were up 4.5% December compared with a year ago, but a little deceiving. Same store sales, those that are open at least 1 year, were up 2.3%. According to Auto Forecaster, R.L. Polk and Company, new car and truck sales in the U.S. are expected to rise 6.6% this year to over 15 million. The low was in 2009 at 10.4 million. So you can see how far we've come. That was a 27-year low at the time. And the car makers today reported strong sales. I'll cover those in detail in my Week in Review column. Overseas, China, the Purchasing Managers Services Index for December came in at 56.1, fastest in 4 months. That's good. The government's PMI on manufacturing was released and it came in at 50.6. HSBC had said 51.5. Normally HSBC is below the government's total. HSBC released PMI figures for December manufacturing for South Korea, 50.1, which is the best since May. Taiwan, 50.6, which was up. And India was up to 54.7, so that's all better. In Germany, their unemployment rate rose, depending on the metric, it's very confusing there, to 6.7 or 6.9%. Up from 6.5%, but this is still historically low. And Congress convened the 113th. It's 55-45 in the Senate, 234-199 with 2 vacancies in the House. John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi retain their leadership positions. Boehner cried during his speech, and it was back to normal, unfortunately. Now, reviewing the tax package, looking at it dispassionately and as a pragmatist, I just have to be on record that the income tax hike on incomes above $450,000 for couples to 39.6, I don't disagree with as part of a balanced plan. The capital gains dividend tax rate hike to 20% for the 450K club. I agree with that also as part of a balanced plan. Making the alternative minimum tax patch permanent is a good idea. The new estate tax levels aren't bad, certainly given the alternative. But no doubt all 4 I just mentioned provide certainty, at least. But we now must tackle the spending side of the ledger and couple it with the debt ceiling. Whether President Obama wants to tie the two together or not, economist Ian Shepherdson, someone I admire, said the relief rally in stocks of Monday and Wednesday isn't going to last long because we're going to be slugging this out until February or March, predicting a bloody, messy, appalling spectacle among lawmakers that will depress consumer and business sentiment. While I mentioned that the certainty with some of the tax provisions is a positive, economist Peter Merici warned that higher taxes on small businesses coupled with increasing costs from Obamacare will drag down hiring significantly. Small businesses now have more certainty, he says, the assurance of more burdensome regulations, healthcare costs, and taxes, and this will burden growth. Ah yes, Obamacare, that cool 3.8% surcharge tacked onto income and investment income for the millionaires that are now described as 450,000. What's depressing is that Congress and the President are incapable of acting in the interest of the American people. But the people won't accept entitlement reform. All the polls show that. We talk about how we want to reduce spending, but then when it comes to us, no. And we don't have a leader that deals with reality. Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security will account for nearly half of all federal spending by 2022, just 10 years from now, up from 41% in 2011. I think it's now more like 44%. And instead of 3% plus growth, which was the norm in the 1980s and 1990s, the forecast for the next 20 years is more like 2 to 2.5%. Plus the demographics are not on our side, let alone in Europe and Asia, just to throw them in, where the entitlement issues are even more serious in many cases. I was watching CNBC this afternoon and was alerted to the fact that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had posted an opinion on Yahoo, and Bill Griffith said he didn't even know Yahoo had an opinion page. You know, my column has been on Yahoo, buried. I can never find it. Every now and then I remember it's still there. It's under some kind of commentary link, and it's been there for over 10 years. Anyway, Mitch McConnell said today, now that the president has gotten his long-sought tax hike on the rich, we can finally turn squarely toward the real problem, which is spending. McConnell said the debate on taxes is over. Now the conversation turns to cutting spending on the government programs that are the real source of the nation's fiscal imbalance. And the upcoming debate on the debt limit is the perfect time to have that discussion. The president may not want to have a fight about government spending over the next few months, but it's the fight he is going to have. Urging Democrats to deliver the same kind of bipartisan resolution to the spending problem we have now achieved on revenue. So is Mitch McConnell. Editorial from the Financial Times. Mr. Obama has said consistently he will not negotiate with the Republicans over the debt ceiling, but it is difficult to see how he will be able to de-link his request for a debt ceiling increase from the parallel negotiations over the sequester, which, remember, was not tackled the other day and has been postponed to March 1st. Republicans are demanding $1 in spending cuts for every dollar they approve and higher borrowing limits. Mr. Obama insists that any spending cuts must be matched equally by new taxes. Quite how or whether these divisions can be reconciled in time to avert a technical sovereign default is worryingly unclear. George Will in the Washington Post. As economists Glenn Hubbard and Tim Kaine explain in National Affairs Quarterly, the U.S. political system cannot govern the entitlement state that exists largely to provide material benefits to individuals. Piling up unsustainable entitlement promises, particularly enactment of Medicare in 1965 and the enrichment of Social Security benefits in 1972, has been improvident for the nation but rational for the political class. The promised expenditures far in excess of revenue would come due beyond the horizon of political consequences. Our politicians, say Hubbard and Kaine, are acting rationally, but politically rational behavior is now fiscally perverse. Both parties are responding to powerful electoral incentives to neither raise taxes nor cut spending. Hence, the clash over raising the debt limit that gripped Washington during the summer of 2011 was just the beginning, not the end of our fiscal woes. David Ignatius, Washington Post, hardly a staunch conservative if you've followed his work. He does some very excellent work. Obama had seemed poised a few weeks ago to become at last the political leader the country needs. He won a brilliant election victory using political tools so sophisticated that Republican strategists have been trying ever since to reverse engineer them so they can avoid humiliating defeats. Obama spoke to the nation after the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in a voice that was truly presidential in its restrained expression of deep grief. In short, Obama seemed ready to lead. And then what happened? In his December fiscal negotiations with the GOP, Obama repeated many of the mistakes he made earlier in his first term. Rather than come to the table with a grand vision of his own, a real strategy for cutting the deficit and the entitlement programs that drive it, he played a poker game of incremental bargaining with House Speaker John Boehner. This was an unwise approach even before Boehner demonstrated his incompetence by failing to pass his Plan B alternative through the GOP-controlled House. Unfortunately, Obama has been playing a waiting game on fiscal issues ever since he became president. He didn't formulate a plan for long-term solvency, partly because he didn't want to give up the political weapon of Social Security before the 2012 election. He didn't fully embrace the Simpson-Bowles deficit reduction plan for the same reason. Too early, said his aides. He didn't talk honestly about the deficit problem during the campaign either. And although Obama finally offered in last month's discussions with Boehner to revise the cost of living adjustment to Social Security, he retreated after the Plan B debacle. Obama must lead his own party as a first step toward truly leading the country. The top Democrats in Congress, Senator Harry Reid and Representative Nancy Pelosi, come across to much of the country as partisan, divisive figures, yet too often Obama defers to them. Using Biden as the political Mr. Fix-It only compounds this problem. Biden may be a deal maker, but he's hardly a visionary. It's Obama's job to lead the party toward entitlement reforms and other policies that will be painful but necessary. Obama should communicate his vision forcefully to the country, governing over Congress's head as Ronald Reagan did if necessary. It's depressing, after 4 years of gridlock, a president who won what was supposed to be a decisive election is back once again to the politics of gridlock. That's bad for Obama, but worse for the country. Obama can still be the strong, successful president the country needs, but not unless he lifts his game. That was David Ignatius. Well, I was going to get into Europe. I'm going to leave that aside. I am going to pull up one space for item on Greece, and as the Wall Street Journal wrote today of a scandal that hit the Greek tourism agency, auditors have discovered a series of improper transactions totaling about $15.8 million and extending back as far as 2003, according to senior government officials. Political appointees connected to Greece's two mainstream parties, both of which are part of the country's current fragile coalition, could be implicated, officials and analysts said, and that, as one professor of political history at the University of Athens told the Journal, if this proves to be a big scandal, and it certainly sounds like it is, all hell will break loose. I have no doubt this may even cause the fall of the government. I've been talking about the fall of the government and the rise of the far right and far left. Of course, Syriza, the party on the far left, actually polls #1. It's just that the government today was able to cobble together a coalition last year during elections. Finally, just watch, January 10th in Venezuela, does Hugo Chavez show up for his inauguration. He's still in Cuba. I say he's virtually on his deathbed. If he cannot attend his inauguration and does not step down, the National Assembly president must determine whether his absence is temporary or permanent according to the Constitution. If the absence is considered to be permanent, elections must be held within 30 days. The opposition in Venezuela is fuming over the lack of truth about Chavez's medical condition. All right, that's all for tonight. I'll be back with you on Monday. Remember, Fridays I write Week in Review all day, all night. Post it Saturday morning. Check it out. Also, starting next week, unless the stock market is closed, like for Martin Luther King Day, I will be doing these nightly newscasts, come hell or high water, Monday through Thursday through April without interruption. Keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. For more stuff, go to stocksandnews.com. I'm Brian Trumbord. Take care.